Today's episode is brought to you by Hustler Made to Work. I'm really honoured that they've come on to support the podcast because I've actually been using Hustlers for almost 10 years now myself. They're some of the most reliable machines that I've ever used in my business. More about them later in the podcast. All right, welcome to today's episode of the Australian Lawn and Garden Podcast. I've been looking forward to this one. We've got Steven Zani. Is it Zani?
It's
got it
Zani.
right, wrong?
Yes, it's Italian. Yep. But if you know another Zani, they are definitely related to me.
Right, it's not very common, but I wanted to get you on because I, in my neglect of the industry, have not had somebody who is a dedicated, what you would call a nurseryman. And you have been doing this your whole life, or your whole working life since you were 15. And I don't know how we got connected, but I saw you on LinkedIn and I thought, this guy, he seems like a nice guy. You could be pulling the wool over my eye. We're about to find out.
I'm pretty crazy.
And I reckon we're going to have a good conversation. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background of how you got into doing this? And we can chat all things life at a nursery and from somebody behind the scenes to see what it's really like.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Steven. I am, as I said previously, I've pretty much been in nursery straight since I was 15. I started off at Australian Orchid Nursery in Tyab, and I also did some weekends at Haas, watering in. At the time, I was searching for an apprenticeship, really pushing forward at the places I was working at, and didn't lead me anywhere in particular. So I ended up landing one at Hermitage Nursery, which is a hedging and screening nursery on the Mornington Peninsula. And I was there for 12.7 years, would you believe it? And pretty much a little birdie in the back of my head says there's a big wide world out there and you can see more stuff. And I decided to see what was out there. And once you get that ball rolling, it's pretty hard to stop. So then I ended up with one of our suppliers. Colin Hyatt, he bought a lot of plants off us quite a long time ago to do his property. And so I knew of him. And then I just sort of went up to him and just like me going up to you, just asking for a job and say what's the word or what's the positions. And yeah, so that was history. We are one of Melbourne's leading design companies. We specialise in Palm Springs mixed with Australian natives. We work meticulously with our clients to ensure the very best results. We love mass plantings, but we also have a retail store at Murdoch, very small retail store, 545 at the Studio and Co. Yeah. And we also have a maintenance crew. We do a little bit of everything from tip to toe. And it's really the best way to ensure quality because, as I'm sure you know, if you've done gardens and landscapes, when you buy from this, that, and the other in other nurseries, you can get different aphids, you could get different diseases, you could get all sorts of things. So by growing the plants that we put into the gardens, we're able to control that quality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like you guys in your role are fairly... There's like this massive expectation that the plants are going to be amazing. You just talk about aphids there, you talk about all this sort of stuff. But you have this super high expectation on the nursery to deliver great results. And then like zero thanks is what my experience has been, at least. It's kind of like this should be perfect. And if it's not perfect, we're upset, but it's perfect. And see you later. We'll see you next time, I guess, walk off. Am I explaining the experience accurately?
Yeah, look, a lot of the big places can treat you like that. In my experience, staying with smaller nurseries and staying with a small core group of people, I find it's much more like a small family business. That's why personally I've always gravitated towards, say, even at Hermitage, we weren't exceeding 15 staff. I always tend in the back of my mind, my dad did Blue Scope for over 20 years, and he said, boy, don't do what I did and try and feed a family on doing night shifts. Find a trade. It doesn't have to be plumbing. It could be anything, but stick to one thing and follow your dreams. And really, growing up in Balnarring, I was able to help my nana out a lot in the garden, and that led to really me starting to get in my head of what I could do. It's been great fun.
Do you ever get blamed as the nursery for the problems of a professional landscaper? Is that common? Because I feel like you're going to get it a lot from the homeowners, but most of the people listening to this would be professionals or contractors or very keen hobbyists. But
Mm.
I've heard enough stories of some pretty dodgy guys and girls out there, and they like to throw somebody else under the bus. So is that something
No,
you
we don't like
experience
to
a
do
lot?
that at all. No,
No.
we don't like to do that at all because we get a lot of our natives through other suppliers as well. We have a very close knit group of people that we work with, and I find generally that you know back in the old days, it used to be that nurseries used to stick to what they do really well. And you used to collaborate with other nurseries to pass on that product to people.
Mhm.
A lot of stuff that happens nowadays is that everybody likes to undercut each other, and it's become a bit of a cowboy business in that regard. So if there was something I would really like to change, it would be that we all got along a little bit better. Um, we get along great with our suppliers, but I have heard some stories out there, and it's really best to just stick with your guns, stick with your products, stick with your suppliers, and yeah, treat everybody else with respect. Because at the end of the day, we're all sort of in the same basket.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Like I find that in the maintenance side of the industry, which is where we are, a lot of
Mm,
people feel like other maintenance businesses are an enemy, or other maintenance businesses are an opposition to fight against. But the reality
no,
is that I believe that any business that is doing good work is actually on the same team as you. The
yeah,
enemy
absolutely.
is the people who cut corners, rip people off, and give the industry as a whole a bad name.
Mm,
Because what you will find is that people who do really good work in this industry, right, they don't need the money. Everyone needs a certain amount of money, but they're doing well enough that they don't undercut people. They're not ripping people off. And if you create great relationships with those people, they will often be your friend, and they will pass on work that they don't want, or they will.
mm.
And I find that the collaborative approach that you're talking about is a way better business strategy long term than fighting tooth and nail to the bottom because my ficus is 13 cents cheaper than yours or whatever it is.
All that happens a lot. And it's you're better off to be known for your quality and your relationship with other people than pure quantity and price. You can go for the low ball, but at the end of the day, the quality's going to suffer because you're pumping out so much plants that it doesn't match that standard that you want. Which is why, as I say personally, as a worker, I would stick to smaller nurseries because they usually focus more on quality than just pure numbers. Potting machines, I've seen in my experience with potting machines, their finish can be quite rough. And it's almost, you would find that with probably your equivalent would be probably say lawnmowers or hedge trimmers. You would find that you can tell the difference between we can tell the difference between a hedge trimmer that basically doesn't cut it right.
Yeah,
Trimming
sure.
trimming lawn, you want to find nice cut. It's the same idea.
Yeah, so someone who's cutting corners on their maintenance on their machines is going to do a worse quality cut and probably be a little bit cheaper because they're not doing the
Yeah,
maintenance side of it. Yeah,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
so for me, let's say I'm brand new to the idea of plants, right? And I'm a homeowner, and I'm walking up. I've got a budget, so I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to get professional, but I'm not so tight arsish, if that's the worst, that I can't afford a good plant.
Mm.
Um, what am I looking for when I'm looking for a plant? What can I look for that would make or distinguish a good plant from a bad plant, or a good nursery or an average nursery from a good nursery? What are the things that I can look out for? Is there things straight away that you notice that you could point out to
Mm.
us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people, when they start gardening, especially when their head's a blank slate, you look backwards and you say, what can I do here? There's a lot of choice. There's a lot of, I call it noise in the nursery industry. What you really want to focus on is a lot of the times you have to think about yourself and your capacity as a personal gardener. If you're not going to get a maintenance team in, it's probably not the best idea to grow something that's going to be 6 feet, 8 feet tall like a large conifer. I find in that circumstance, probably a low-lying euonymus would be good, mixed in with a couple of cacti as feature plants. I wouldn't go too crazy with the pittosporums, as I say, they can, if when left unkept, they can get quite high. Um, yeah. So it just depends on the person. But in terms of trying to find your plants and where to source them from. Try and source it from the smaller guys. The problem is, I worry about Australia's almost going down the road of Americanism, where you buy a plant, you go to Bunnings, and the people that supply Bunnings do okay, but everybody else is not doing okay. You
Yeah.
want to buy locally and keep it local, and you will find that local nurseries actually care about what they're doing. They care about placement. They won't. You go to Bunnings and buy a plant, or you go to another place and buy a plant. And they will basically just go like, "Here it is, thank you, see you later."
Yeah.
We try not to do that as a company, but also just personally, I'm very big on placement and making sure that it's the right plant for that place.
If you've been thinking about getting to ride-on mowing this season, or you want to upgrade the ride-on mower you currently have a look at the Hustler range. Like I said before, I've been using them for almost 10 years now, and I can honestly say they are some of the most versatile and reliable machines I have ever used. One of the things about Hustlers is you can use them on overgrown jobs, and I did a lot of those in the early days, but take that same mower and put it on a highly manicured lawn and it still does a really good job. Hustlers have a great range all the way from the 34-inch dash to the Super 104, which is a 104-inch wide mower. Add to that the Raptor range, Fast Track, X1, Super Z, Super S, and the Hustler likely have a mower that suits your budget and your goals. In addition, Hustler have 130 plus dealers across the country, which means heaven forbid, if something were to go wrong, that help is not far away. And that is crucial if you're relying on that machine for your income. I'm really honored that Hustler have come on board to support the podcast because it's a brand I truly believe in. If you want to get into ride-on mowing this season, like I said, check out the range. Thank you, Hustler, for support. Hustler, here to work. So is there an obvious thing that I can look at? Let's say I've got two lily pillies next to each other, right? Let's say, I don't know, lily pilly, big red, or whatever it is, the same variety of lily pilly. Is there certain things I could look for that would indicate that I'm finding a better plant, or that I'm, like I go to a nursery, I'm like, okay, it looks like they're cutting corners here. This might be a little worse quality. I might not get the return on investment I'm looking for. Or is it actually really hard to tell until you plant it?
Yeah, I'm following you. A good way I would test is possibly to check the root ball, which is quite often you turn the pot upside down, you take the pot out. Um, some places might not let you do this, but a good local nursery will show you. Once the roots are down the side of the plant, that means it has a better success of establishing up. Hence, when people buy plants, it's understandable it's a perishable product. But if you check on the soil, make sure they use good quality soil, and check on the growth as well. Check the leaves, make sure they're not wrinkly, they're not showing any signs that yellow, they look a bit hungry. All of those things make the difference for sure. And as I say, it doesn't mind to do a bit of background research. It can be quite daunting when you've got a new house and nothing there, which is sort
Yeah.
of where it comes to when you go to a smaller place, they'll be able to help you walk through some processes without doing full consultation. They'll just be able to guide you in a way that helps you get that result that you need. Similar to how you would if you didn't have a lawn. If I just showed you a backyard full of dirt, and I'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, what's the go here? At the moment, my lawn is cacao, and I can tell you it comes under the garden bed barrier, and it's just a weed. It looks great when it's maintained, but if I was to build a house, I probably wouldn't use cacao. But that's just between you and me.
No, yeah, no one else is listening. Look, I think I keep saying like haiku it is definitely difficult, but it can be done really well. It takes work, and if people are
When you
not,
work it, you get good
yeah,
results.
if people are not into their lawn, they're like, man, this thing it grows so much, and yeah, the worst thing is when people chuck out some cheap, nasty fertilizer on it to give it a boost of color, and you get 17 meters of growth in the next 35 seconds, and yeah, that's the problem. But okay, so I want to get into this as well because I feel like what happens before. Let's just put it on the screen before we started talking. You did this thing about yuccas, which went
Yes.
pretty big on the interwebs. This is from Yahoo News. Aussie gardener Oh, sorry. Aussie gardeners, invasive plant warning, destroying their surroundings. Anyways, you just did a simple TikTok. I can't play the audio, unfortunately, because I'm
No, you're
technically
fine.
inept. There you are. But
I don't like the sound of my own voice.
we can watch it and we can just have a laugh at this. But this got a lot of views because you're complaining about plant placement here, and I'll
Mm,
describe it for those who are watching. There's a massive yucca right next to a fence. It's a wooden fence, and the root ball is as large as the garden bed is wide, and slightly larger, legitimately slightly larger. It is going to push this fence over. So what I want to get on here is that you will see a lot of people who come in with an idea, and their idea is because they saw something on TV or the internet or something on Instagram, and it's a bad idea, and you have to try and talk them out of that. Is that an easy job? Is that a hard job? Is that something you love? Is that something you hate? Tell us about that.
Um, I'm very big on plant placement. It's specifically interesting as a gardener and as a nurseryman when you see plants placed in the wrong area. And you often go, what was in their minds when they did that? Yuccas are not necessarily a bad plant. There's a couple of yucca varieties which are exotic and they make quite a nice feature plant, but not against a fence. And especially when, that fence in that video is less than 8 years old and it's already going to be completely gone. In the next few years, it'll start to break. And um, yeah, it was just a silly little video, honestly, on a Sunday afternoon. I was actually having a bath when I said to my partner, "Gee, it's really getting some traction." And then, yeah, somebody on Yahoo News said I could share it out. I'm like, sure. Um, get the word out there so hopefully people in their head when they plant their garden out, they don't just think what looks good on the TV. They actually think, right, what's going to be good sustainably,
Yeah.
which is why we as a company mix in a lot of natives with our work because we feel as if specifically in a lot of gardens that we have to try and take back a little bit of that because over the last 20 years there's so much gardens which have just been put in which have got nothing, no natives at all. A lot of our succulents are actually native Australian succulents as well. Um, but personally, it's all about placement. I cannot tell you the amount of times I cringe when I look at a yucca and I'm just going, oh, why did they put it there?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, read the label as well. People often buy plants and just throw the label out. Please don't do that. The label does have very important growing information.
Mhm.
Even if you've just got a cupboard or a box in your shed, keep those labels. They're really important. Mm,
So, have you ever had it where someone's coming through to the checkout at whatever nursery you've been at, and
mm.
they have a trolley full of something, and you're looking at it going, this is strange, and you get changed to them, and you realize that they're about to waste a whole bunch of money on some plants. They're going to plant some full sun plants in full shade, or they're going to, do something silly like that. Does that happen a lot, or are people a little bit smarter than that?
When it comes to cacti and yuccas, when it comes to cacti and succulents, people are generally aware that they require full sun. However, a lot of our stuff does go quite well in part shade indoor plants as well. But when it comes to sort of somebody buying something and you know it's not the right thing, you have to be honest.
Mm.
Honesty is best integrity because a lot of the times they don't know. They're just looking at a plant because it's pretty and they think it'll work well. When you explain to people that it's not going to work so well and this is going to work better than this, quite often they will go for this. Um, 9 times out of 10, people don't get offended when you say, I really don't think that's going to be great for the spot you've chosen. I'm very big on um, when I work retail is to make sure that people show me where they're going to place things. Send a photo. What does the area look like? What's the soil? What's the drainage like? It's extremely important. And I think people and customers would rather you be honest than as I say, to just sell a plant and get it out the door. It's that more personable
Yeah.
experience.
I guess that's the difference between a cheap and an expensive nursery too. Because if you're cheap and nasty and you're cutting corners on costs, you just need to sell a certain amount to make ends meet, and
Pretty much,
you
yeah.
you let them get through the door and go whatever. They'll be back in 2 weeks with more plants if we just let them do
Mhm.
that. But yeah, it's not
We
lacking
are
integrity.
We
Yeah.
are very big on long lasting gardens. Quite often, Colin will visit gardens that he's done 15 years ago. He has good relationships with our customers. And often we send the maintenance crew down there to check on things, how they're growing. But apart from that, sometimes he just goes over for a cuppa and has a talk and sees how things are going. But yeah, we're really investment. We're really like eyes forward into the future, not so much just chuck a garden together and leave the job. See you, thank you later. We're very much long term. Make sure people are happy with it as an investment because lawns are expensive, gardens are expensive. It's a
Yeah.
big thing, and if you try and look after people, the word spreads and people pick up on it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like the role is getting harder to find good people in as well in this industry?
Yeah, it's happened a lot. I mean, since I was 15, I've sort of seen a pattern. Some people go, "Oh, I want to work at a plant nursery," but they don't really realize that it's actually a trade. They just think, "Oh, we'll fiddle around with some plants and go home and have a la di da day." But
Yeah.
it's pretty full on, especially when you're dealing with wholesale production nurseries. It is production. Um, and a lot of people can be unprepared for that. Uh, I think it's a great trade and it's a great industry to be in. I absolutely love it and I wouldn't be anywhere else. But I think a lot of the times finding good talent can be difficult because a lot of people going into nursery work don't really expect what the work might be, if that's the best way
Right.
I can put it.
So they have an expectation that it's going to be simple, easy. Put
Mm.
some, water some plants. I don't know. Check for some aphids, and then talk to some customers and go home and have a nap or something like that.
Yeah, well, I could say I need 300 agave Kikyo cans for an order, and they'll look at me blank. Um, it's check the irrigations, check soil. It's a full blown trade, just as much as anything else is. And you'd probably find that with just doing lawns and gardening as well. And the maintenance side is that a lot of people just go, "Oh, you just sit on a ride-on mower and go home, and you must have it easy." And you go, "No, there's a bit more to it than that, buddy." It's
Yeah.
people people will find what they stick to, but I always go with your heart and go with the job you love because at the end of the day you do it every day, so you have to love what you do. This is why I picked something and just gone with it because it's never seen me down and I look forward to doing it until I'm a very old fella.
Well, you guys must have some of the best. I mean, anyone who's working in a nursery, I guess probably the more broad the nursery, the better. But
Mm.
your plant identification and Latin names and just being able to go bam, 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 like because you would have to have that, use that all the time. Am I right or am I wrong? Or
Yeah, look, this is what I say to people. To say you know every plant on earth, you will never master. There is so much in horticulture. Like I haven't really even gone down carnivorous plants yet, and I've been in the industry for since I was 15.
yeah,
I typically know what I've grown, as you would expect. So I know hedging plants, I know orchids, I know cacti, I know succulents. But if you said, what is this carnivorous plant I've got, Stephen? I wouldn't be honest. It's okay to be honest. Um, and there's just a lot out there. It's like even grass and mowers. If you said, what's the difference between a rotary mower versus a ride-on, I'd look at you with silly eyes and go, well, they both sort of cut grass, but it's there's more depth to it. But at the same time, if you try and learn every single plant under the sun, you're never going to get that level of expertise.
yeah, of course.
So it is best to sort of stay focused and stay with what you know, um, but also as you go along in your career, sort of pick up the plants you've done here, pick up these, pick up this, and then eventually you will end up knowing a lot, but you'll never know everything. I grow some rare corpse flowers on the side, just for personal enjoyment. Really, they take about 7 years to flower, and when they flower, they smell like a
Hold on
dead
a
person.
second. Yeah, good. Let's just start here. For your personal enjoyment, you've picked a plant that takes 7 years to flower. I don't know. Are you a
Oh yeah.
masochist, or is there? Have you seen
Um,
therapy for this idea that you've come up with here?
I've had a few people go, Stephen, what do you like about growing plants that smell like dead people? I think it's the difficulty to grow them because They only last for really 3 to 4 days max, but they only stink for the first two. I think it's a bit of an event, you know. I like to pop a bit of wine and go right. I've had a flowering season. It took a long time for me to get there, but now often what I find is it flowers every second year with proper growth. But the bulb's getting pretty big. Mine's around 8.5 kilos at the moment, and they top out at about 15 to 30.
I think you put a
So
picture on LinkedIn, didn't you? At
yeah,
some place.
that one's probably about 7.5 kilos to 6.5 kilos, roughly. I haven't weighed it yet, but it's getting pretty hefty. Mm.
It should load here in a second, but yeah, it's
This
great. The
isn't. This is what I mean, like with it, with in terms of will you know everything? Like I don't even know a lot of bulbs, but I can name these rare bulbs that some of them are from, Middle Eastern countries that are so rare, but they're just I suppose when in my previous role, when I was growing pittosporums a lot for 13 years, my eyes were like, "Oh, what's difficult? What's rare?" And I really just sort of jumped on these things, which are quite interesting.
I saw this when you're talking about identifying plants, reminded me of this meme I saw the other day,
Mm.
where it says, here it is on the screen. When he knows the difference between philodendron and monstera, and you feel a humidity spike in your sphagnum moss, and it's like it's 1800s or earlier Victorian era painting of a lady who is looking very pleased with herself. And I was like, man, I mean, it's funny, but it's a very low bar as well. Come on.
Yeah.
Philodendron and monstera. Come on, we got to do better than that, people. We got to raise the industry standard. You and I, Stephen. We got I need
We
higher
will, we
expectations
will, my
for our
friend.
understanding. Yeah. Oh
It's
mate.
I think in terms of like I suppose industry experts are different because no matter where you're from, like you'll get people that are just starting out with gardening and lawn care and then you could name off every single lawn under the sun and types of grass and but yeah, it just never stops. It's a never stopping learning process, and that's what I really like about the gardening and nursery industry. Is it's
Yeah.
just and even landscaping, getting my feet into landscaping, there's still a lot of stuff that you're going, gee, you think you've done it all, but you just haven't.
I yeah, I've realized the more I do these podcasts, the more I am like, man, I don't know that much. But I go talk to, and you would do the same. Like you talk to someone who's buying
Mm.
plants, or you talk to the client you're working at, and they think you're, the biggest plant genius they've ever met, and you might be the biggest plant genius they've ever
Yeah,
met.
yeah.
But then you talk to somebody else, especially like if we go down the indoor plant, talk about philodendrons. I don't know
Mm.
how many varieties of philodendrons there are, but
No,
like
I couldn't have it.
you just go to any indoor nursery or any indoor enthusiast, and there's like a bajillion of them, and they all look quite well, not all of them, but some of them look quite different. Like they could be entirely different
Mm.
species, and they're not. They're the same thing. And there's some people who just nerd out over it, and they could, from a distance, tell you every little bit of minutia and detail about that philodendron and exactly how to look after it. And you would
Mm.
just be, or I would just be happy to be able to identify it as a philodendron. And it's just
Yeah.
such a broad industry. There's so much to learn, and yeah, I guess yeah, it's an exciting part about it too. You keep learning, you keep growing. It's interesting. It's what makes the job great.
Yeah, it's similar to succulents. The amount of calanchoes and sedums we have that they are calanchoes and sedums, but from the distance you would go, that looks nothing like what you say a sedum gold mound would look like, and then this sedum over here looks more like a calanchoe. So then you're sort of
Yeah.
going, Pittosporums are quite easy. Conifers are quite easy. Mind you, if you were to describe the difference between a Dutch box and an English box, people would generally scratch their heads. A lot of, we would have to have a look at the size of the leaf and the shape. Same thing with olives. A lot of people look at calamatas and say, this is a calamata. And then you look at it and you go, nah, it's not a calamata olive at all. It's yeah, it's incredible the amount of same thing with grasses, I suppose. Like because I'm not
Oh, grasses are
down
hard.
that area. Mm.
Are you talking like lamandras and?
Yeah, but like how do you tell the difference between like a Sir Walter Buffalo to a Lamandra? I mean, I can tell Caillou for sure because I have it, but Yeah, there's a few different ones out there.
No, yeah, I guess the lawn thing for me, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like you do a lot of it, and you can tell from a distance. And some people, I remember going to certain places, and they're like, "Oh, what grass is this?" And like from a distance, you're like, "Oh, that's cooch." And like, how do you know? And it's like
Mm,
you
mm.
can just tell. And it's nothing to you, but to somebody who's a philodendron expert, they might be like, "What the hell? I could never guess that." And then they do the same thing with philodendrons, straight back at you. And you go
Yeah,
down
yeah.
fruit trees, and then you go down roses, and then you just talked about succulents, and then indoor plants, and then bulbs, and then vegetables, and it's like, man, there's 50, 60 different angles that you could be an expert on this
Oh,
industry,
God.
and you
Yeah.
you go deep in that single direction at the expense of everything else.
Mm.
And you could be the biggest tree expert ever, and someone hands you some vegetable, and you have no idea how to grow it.
Yeah, or I
Yeah.
hand them a rare corpse bulb, and they're going, "Where the hell is this from?" And I'm going, "Oh, somewhere in yeah, somewhere in some country somewhere." But yes, it never ends, but it's great fun, and it always keeps you engaged. It's you never know in terms of landscaping what each job site's going to be different. Or same thing with mowing. You know, you would say to client, "This is right. I need my lawn mowed," but then you go and okay, well, I don't know what I'm working with here. So, which is why when it comes back to placement, I'm sure you would appreciate, when you get clients that send you a photo and go, right, this is what I'm dealing with here, as opposed to come to my house and just mow it.
Yeah, and I like clients who want something that's good, and they don't want to know about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're just like, we just trust you to deal with it. And you're like,
Mm,
yes, that's my favorite type of client. They don't need to have an endless budget as long as you have a
mm,
conversation. You say, hey, look, I think we need to do this. And they go, look, I believe you. I agree with you. We don't have the money right now. No worries. No pressure.
yeah.
Let's discuss that when you do have the money. And but at least they trust you. It's the ones that are meddling and they have an opinion and their opinion is wrong, and you have to try and communicate with them. You're like, oh, I'm just a gardener. I don't want to be a communicator as well. I don't want to have to let you down and tell you that you're a
Mm.
bit of an idiot. But anyways,
Communication is very important.
yeah, it is, and that's what I was
Communication with your
talking.
clients, communication with your peers, communication with your suppliers and the other people you work with. I would never say a bad name about anybody I've worked for or worked with. Um, and yeah, I never will, because there's nothing to be. If you go in with the attitude of you're doing the best you can, you're working, you're doing what you love, you don't have much to complain about, really.
No, you're right. I do. Yeah, there's a line there. There's certain. I think you're right. The professional approach. Someone has to really cross a line
Mm,
to deserve to be outed, because most people, when they're doing something wrong, it's an honest mistake, or it's an honest drop the ball. And
mm,
I was even talking to, some people. Talking to some mates about some verdi mowing and stuff like that, and there was somebody who put up some photos of a job they were doing verdi mowing, and they had done a rather poor job, and
mm.
we were talking about it, and because we all do it professionally, and I was like, look, when I first started in the industry, we didn't have these kind of resources that we have now on YouTube and Facebook and all that sort of stuff, and
Google
my
Lens.
well, yes, Google Lens is great, but like
It is quite accurate.
it's amazing. But look, I remember my first verdi mowing job 8 years ago, and it
Mm,
was rubbish. And I'm almost embarrassed now, other than the fact that it was my first. I'm almost
mm,
embarrassed at the job that I did, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have access to that sort of information. And if somebody had ripped into me and outed me back then and been like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, which is kind of true, it would have been terrible and horrible for me. And I was just trying to do the best I could. No, there was no obvious learnings I could have had from the
mm.
internet. You got to do the best you can with where you're at. But yes,
Yeah.
tell me about Google Lens, because I've also been using that quite a bit for my identification.
It's not bad. It sometimes tells you like the genus, but not like the subspecies. But it generally does point you in the right direction in terms of plant identification. Um, but on what you were saying before, being an apprentice, mistakes are just part of what happens. The main thing is, I was told when I was an apprentice, I was very much told, when you make a mistake, you own up to it and you learn from it. There's no bad books. And that's really the best approach, because you're bound to make mistakes, especially when you start off. And especially when you start off in an industry where quite often you'll be surrounded by people that have been doing it for so long. I was not that type of person. I was fresh out of the oven when I started as an apprentice. I did a couple of weekend watering and had worked at an orchid nursery, but I wasn't thrown in the deep end. So yeah, mistakes are quite commonplace. So anybody listening, learn from it, admit to it, be honest, and then you'll find that you'll just move on from that, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. But yeah, Google Lens is. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. Google Lens is
That's right.
fantastic.
What's some funny mistakes you've seen, whether they were yourself or a colleague that you're not going to name or anything like that? But yeah, what are the funny mistakes you've seen made in the industry in your time?
Oh God. Anything from dropping a pallet of pots down and the whole thing just falls.
I was
Yeah,
like clay pots and smashing
nah,
everything,
not
or
clay, just the plastic pots. But anyway, and anything from hitting sprinklers, that happens quite often with the use. Sometimes you take a corner a little bit too hard and then you hit it and then you're going, oh boy, then you're pulling the star picket back up again. We've all made those
hoping no one
mistakes.
noticed. Yeah.
It's look, half the time you can laugh about it, other times you're just going, oh my God. But yeah, it comes with any job. If you said to me, Stephen, make a sandwich, or scoop some ice cream, or work hospitality, I could not make you a cup of coffee, but I could sure give it a red hot go, and I'll probably fail the first 6 times I do it, and then maybe after the sixth time, I'm like sort of getting there, but not really. It just comes with experience, but yeah, you shouldn't feel bad about it. It's just something that happens.
Recently, I made a small business course called the Aussie Green Biz Mastery course. It's for people who are starting out in the industry or who have been in maybe for a year or two and they're really good at the gardening side, but they struggle on the business side. There's 47 lessons that cover everything from how to get great clients to how to work out your pricing, how to work out a system that's efficient, and ultimately set up a business that is going to be successful. Essentially, what I did is I thought about myself as a 19-year-old. I thought, looking back when I started my business, what would I tell my 19-year-old self to help him avoid all the stupid mistakes that I ended up making and have success in a much quicker time frame? If you know somebody who wants to start a business, it's made for them. If you're struggling in your business, you love the industry, and you want a successful business, this is made for you. We recently added the option as well to break down the payment over 4 months, so it makes it a little bit more affordable for those who are just starting out. The course is called the Aussie Green Biz Mastery course. For more information, follow the link. If you're wanting to upgrade your lawn care this season, jump on today's sponsor, The Lawn Shed. Lawn Shed stock a full range of everything you need for great lawn care, from fertilizers to wetting agents to soil amendments to pre-emergent, post-emergent, plant growth regulators, everything that you could need. Their products are actually the products used by stadiums across the country. I've seen them in the sheds there when I've done tours. My opinion has always been that if you're going to charge for a service, use the best quality stuff you can get. So jump on the Lawn Shed today, sign up for a trade account, and tell them that you heard about their services through the podcast. Thank you so much for supporting Lawn Shed. Well, what do you think is the best part of working, or the best part about working in a nursery?
Oh, it's the type of work. I like working outside. I could never really imagine myself working in an office. It's also the people. The people I've met along the way are very important, and I love them like family. And it's the people, the work, the lifestyle. Some people don't like that working at a plant nursery. You will be outside when it's raining. Like, you will be satched. Some people don't really realize that, but for me, I love it. I'm like, oh, this is better than sitting in front of a computer all day. And once you're wet, you're sort of already wet, so it's it's a bit like
It's
that.
done. Just stay wet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like when you're sitting on a lawnmower and then it absolutely buckets down with 20 mils of rain, and you're just going, I'm already there, so I might as well keep going.
Oh
But
yeah. Until
yeah,
you have a hill on that ride on lawnmower, and you'll be drifting all the way to the bottom with that
yeah,
much
it's not
rain.
best to cut lawns when it's wet, is it? I was told that when I
Sometimes
was
you
very
gotta
young.
do it. You gotta do what you gotta do sometimes, and you just gotta, you know what I mean. I've been there before, where
Mm.
it's raining cats and dogs. And you're like, I have to get through a certain amount of jobs today, and I've put on my, the problem with waterproof clothing is it's also like
They're not real.
airproof.
Yeah,
Well,
they're not waterproof.
you sweat so much. underneath it when you're working physically that you may as well just have your t-shirt on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you shouldn't have worn anything. It's like anything protective for the rain because you're going to get sweaty underneath or it's going to be rain. And I would prefer to be wet with the fresh rain than my own sweat if I'm going to have
yeah,
the
yeah,
choice, you
yeah.
know?
Which is why I wear shorts so much. A lot of people go, gee, these nursery people are wearing shorts a lot. Well, actually, if you wear a lot of wet weather pants, it stays wet. When with shorts, at least if you get a towel, you can dry yourself off and keep going. When wearing wet pants, it'll take ages to dry off. Um, yeah, oh God, the weather. But
I
yeah,
hate
I
I
got
hate the wet socks though. That's the thing for me. If I can keep my
yeah, when you
socks dry, that's the
yeah, when
worst.
you
For
mm,
me, it's usually when I'm fixing irrigation and you've got to quickly run between the sprinklers or whatever, and it's obviously blasting your shins,
yeah,
and that runs down, and you can have your sock protectors on, but enough of that running through the sprinklers, and you got wet socks, and once you got wet socks, it's like, mate, you
you're
may
just
as well
walking in
have.
water.
You need
Mm,
5 or 6 pairs if you're going to be all day fixing irrigation, and you need to get your blower out, change your socks out, blast your feet dry, blast the inside of your boots dry, and then
mm.
go for it again. For me, that just wrecks the day. But
Oh God,
um,
having wet feet. Yeah, it's not a nice feeling. It's certainly not. You almost feel as if you're walking in. So you gotta have spare socks. But yeah, that's not a great feeling. Hey, I got to ask you a question. What's your opinion on sort of the video game realm in terms of there's a video game out which is called Lawn Mowing Simulator, and I played a bit of it, and I'm like, gee, I wonder how accurate. Like you have to pick out debris first, and then you have to refill, and it's a big thing with gaming at the moment. It's simulation games, and they just make everything a simulation. Have
yeah,
you
I
tried that?
I've seen a friend of mine play it. So a friend of mine who's got a YouTube channel, his channel's called Lawn Tips, and he's got
Mm,
quite a few followers, and people watch him, and he was doing a live stream, and he's like, "Oh, I'll just play this game, just for just to be funny about it." But I look. I mean, I'm not a gamer. I
mm,
when I got married many years ago, almost 10 years ago now, I basically let my younger brother, have the Xbox because we used to share one, and decided that I was not going to play anything anymore. And part of it was because I feel like for me, when I really get into that sort of stuff, I get into it a little bit too much and then sort of spend. It's not that they're bad or like stupid, but the amount of time that I'd put into it would be bad and stupid, if that makes sense.
oh
And
God.
but I find it even more strange that people will spend time playing a video game for free, essentially doing something that I get paid
That they
for.
do for work.
Yeah, because it's not walk behind mowing from what I've seen. It's ride on mowing. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah, it
sitting
is.
down steering a
Mm.
virtual mower. You could go outside and steer a legitimate mower.
And
And
get
we
paid
need
for it.
workers exactly. We need workers in
Yeah.
the industry. We'll pay you money. Come and do it. And then someone's like, I don't know, maybe it's the gamification of it. Maybe we need like a status bar, which is like 96% complete, or I don't know, something like that. But
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
I don't understand. I don't know. Do you play games at all? Is that something
I
that you
do
get
a little
into?
bit. Yeah, it's I mean, nowadays, I'll be lucky to get an hour in every 2 nights, but just to get my mind off it, I don't personally see the difference between, say, watching a film or playing a game, because at least playing a game, you're
I
engaged
agree.
somewhat in what's going on, but certainly involved in a time sink. I've seen some streamers do like 3,000 hours on Lawn Mowing Simulator, and I'm going, now, if that was real life,
Oh,
how
gee.
productive would you be?
Mate, if you're doing ride on mowing in Australia and you've got a
Mm,
good ride on, right, you should be making 120 an hour for time on site, like you really good ride on. 3,000 hours,
yeah.
right, at 120 an hour is $360,000, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, there are people out there that have dumped that much time into, Call of Duty or World of Warcraft, and I've got to look up the stats on maybe who's played this game for the longest, because really, you think if they've actually turned that into a job instead of playing it as a game, but yeah, it's wild.
I mean, I can
You-
understand. I can understand Call of Duty because it's kind of like you don't. Nobody wants to go and actually do Call of Duty in real life
oh
because
god, That is war.
The end reality is you get shot 17,000 times, like at least, especially if you have my level of skill. That's one afternoon of me on Call of Duty. But, so it's like those sort of fantasy games like the Zeldas or whatever, where it's like, oh, I can understand that because it's like it's a
Yeah.
completely unrealistic escape from reality, take your mind off life, fun game. And then when someone's like lawn mowing simulator, I'm like, you can get paid for that. Like I don't
Yeah.
understand it. I
Well, it's
never
like
played it, but I still don't understand it.
a part of me thinks it might be like a little bit of OCD. It's like, when like there's another simulator out at the moment called Power Wash Simulator, and I
Oh
get Power
wow.
Washing is very therapeutic. Um, but again, it's like, look, if you want a power wash, get a power washer and go knock on some doors, and then even if you're only getting paid $40, at least you're having that satisfaction rather than sitting on a couch and yeah, there's some strange stuff out there.
I'm gonna see what they cost to hire
Oh,
because, mate, you can get a
oh, I
pretty.
love Guernsey.
I'm just trying to get some pricing, but it looks like somewhere between somewhere around $150 for the best stuff for a day. Some of them are $50, some of them are $69 at Bunnings. I don't know why they picked that number, Bunnings. That's a bit rude. But anyway, they've got like there's a price range. You could just go out and go, I'm gonna hire a machine for $150 today, and I'm gonna go knock on someone's door and say I'll do this for
Give it my best
$300.
go. Mm.
And there you go, $150, and it'll be, I don't know how long it takes you to do this. I should get out of the numbers of it because I don't know what I'm talking about. But the idea is, I'm sure that even if all you had was a little bit of money, you don't even need anything fancy. Just go and do it.
No.
Probably
No,
cost.
even if you just attached a hose with a gurney and just went for your life, like I would do that at home and just gurney my balcony, and it's satisfaction enough. But yeah, it's like what are they gonna make like the nursery simulator where you set up your own like the Sims and you set up the irrigation pipes and then you just go and anyway, it's off the topic of video games. What sort of made you start out with? Oh, I suppose the question I wanted to ask is like, what made you go right? I'm going to start doing podcasting about a little bit about what I do, and yeah, what made you sort of think of that? Because when I did a TikTok, I'm like, nobody's really doing sort of plant TikToks, and that sort of made me think about, oh well, I'll just do a couple of silly videos. But did you sort of intend this to go as far as it has?
Well, so the reason why I did a podcast was I had a series. Well, I had a season of my life where I was really, really unwell. So I have got an
Hmm.
autoimmune condition, and I've been like I've actually very similar to you. I've been gardening since I was 15,
Mm.
and I started my business at 19. And when I was about 26, I got really sick, and for 2.5 years I couldn't work at all. And basically for 4 years I was pretty incapacitated.
I'm sorry to hear
And
that.
so, uh, thank you. Yeah, it's just part of my story. But because of that, we grew the business because I couldn't make money from my own work. I had to hire enough people to make money from them,
Yeah.
and we had to do it rapidly, and we had a lot of challenges, and it was a very difficult season. And the end of that was that we had a lot of interesting lessons, and I was sharing some of those lessons in a couple of groups, and as a result, like Facebook groups, as a result, people had
Mm.
asked me on their podcast. There's a couple of podcasts like Aussie Lawn Stars with Gary Ashton and Lawn Care Skull Sessions with Ben and BJ. And those podcasts did all right. And people were like, oh, we should. A couple of people had mentioned, oh, you should do your own podcast. And I was like, nah, I don't know,
Mm.
And then it probably was like 6, 7, 8 months of thinking about it. Was sort of in the back of my mind because I probably could do it. Would I enjoy it? And after a while, after thinking about it, I was like, no, I actually would enjoy it. And the reason was that no one was doing the podcast that I wanted to listen to. And
Mm.
it wasn't that, I'm not saying that anybody else's podcast isn't good,
Yeah, of
because it's
course.
just a different thing. And
Mm.
the podcasts that were out there at the moment were different things. And I was like, I wish somebody would talk to, for example, stadium managers? Why does no one talk to turf care stadium managers? Why does,
Mhm.
there's very few people who have those sorts of conversations. I want to do an interview with fertilizer production, or how do they make compost, and so that it didn't exist in the same sense that you were talking about with your
Yeah.
TikTok. And this will be roughly episode 130 or something when it eventually comes out.
Oh, gee,
So
that went quick.
yeah. So look, it's I really enjoy it now, and
Mm,
luckily and thankfully, I should say, we got to a point where we can make a small amount of money off it with sponsors and stuff, because
yeah.
it's a hell of a lot of work, and
It's a
people don't
time
understand.
thing.
Yeah, people don't understand it. Like, I mean, me and you have gone back a few times organizing this, and it's kind of, it's not that it's laborsome or anything, but
Yeah.
if you're doing 2 or 3 podcasts a week, recording them, and you got different reschedules or this or that, and then
That's a part-time job.
yeah, it kind of is. So what I'm getting at is, a lot of people, they do a podcast and they get 20 episodes in, and they're like, this is a lot more work than I thought it
Yeah.
would be. I thought I'd just be sitting down and talking with someone for an hour and a half and then releasing it. But so luckily, like, we got a point where we can pay for an editor and, get it out and stuff like that. And yeah, people seem to enjoy it. They keep listening, which is nice.
Oh,
And
of
I'm
course.
really, really appreciative of that, because it's one of those things where there's no guarantee that stuff's going to work when you start out financially. And
Hmm. It's a big risk to go on your own. It's a big risk. And a lot of people don't understand the risk that small business owners do. Like, they're not just doing it on the side, they are literally putting everything into it. And if it goes bust,
mm.
they're on their bum. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that.
and most people in this industry are not in this industry for the money. They're
No,
in this
no, no,
industry
I'm
for
not in
passion.
it for the money.
No, if somebody wanted to if they wanted, this is the thing. If you really cared about gardens, but you also really wanted money, you could go do any other career and then just do your gardening on the weekend.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the thing. So it's a hobby that is so accessible to people that anyone who is motivated by money, and I can't be that broad, but 99% of people who are really motivated by money don't get into gardening. The
Hmm.
people who get into gardening are usually people who, like, as contractors, lawn contractors. I would say 70% of people who are lawn contractors are actually doing it because of their family.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, for sure.
it's 70% of them who they were in finance and they had enough of a, or whatever it was, accounting, or they were, I don't know, a teacher or a chef or whatever and they go, for whatever reason, that didn't suit my family life, and maybe I can earn a little bit more whilst doing this, but the most important thing is I can finish by 3 o'clock and pick my kids up from school every day, or I don't have to work hours I don't want to, or I can
Yeah.
have a relaxed winter and go on holiday. And so that's why they get into the industry. And I love that. And the people, I've said this so many times, the people in the industry, 97% of them, they're just humble, they're enjoyable, they literally love digging. Well, not they love digging, but they're prepared to dig holes and pull out weeds for somebody.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's a kind of
absolutely.
humility that comes with that. And because of that, it's a great industry to be a part of. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's jerks in every industry, but I think as a whole, there's less in the gardening industry than mining or a lot of those other sort of
Yeah.
financially motivated industries.
Or the building industry. Let's not go to the building industry.
yeah. Yeah, they're not having a good time right now either. Anyway, a lot of them are going bust, unfortunately.
Oh, my grandpa, he built half of Balnarring, and he built the yacht club, and he built the general store, and he built the old family home, and um, yeah, he would be sort of rolling over in terms of what gets passed nowadays. But I think that TikTok's well covered by or what's that guy? He goes, "This is non-compliant." I think I got a. That
Oh
was sort
yeah,
of my like.
yeah, I love him.
Yeah,
He's
that
awesome.
was
What's his
my.
name?
I forgot TikTok is that. That was my idea behind the yucca video. I'm just going, people. They're like, if I could do a whole series on do not plant this here. Like, plant it over here, but not over here.
Oh mate, do it. People love it, and people need, homeowners especially. Someone who's a school teacher or whatever, and they've never looked into it before in their life, and they're about to go plant something, and a random TikTok comes up, and they're like, "Oh, that was actually helpful." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
sure.
was about to buy this Moreton Bay fig and plant it in my courtyard. Like, I'm so
Mm.
thankful that you told me not to. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I thought this was a dwarf olive. No, it's not a dwarf olive. Or,
Yeah.
they might buy a Magnolia grandiflora thinking it's going to stay in a 20 centimeter pot and stay here and going, nah, that guy's going to get to about 4 meters high.
Yeah. Oh, I love those big magnolias. I'd
They are
sacrifice my court.
gorgeous.
I'd sacrifice my courtyard for a big magnolia if I had to.
Mm. Especially the scent when they're all flowering up and you've got the bees coming in. It's
Yeah.
Trachyspermum star jasmine. If you know star jasmine, that's got a very nice scent as well. So I don't always. I've got more interest than just plants that smell like rotting corpses.
Yeah, I mean, when you said it only smelled like a rotting corpse for 2 days, I was like, I can handle that. Although
Oh God, yeah.
it's a great alibi if you actually do decide to have a rotting corpse in your property. You know, if you decide to be on the next episode of Breaking Bad in real life, and you got some avoidance of the police to do, and they come to your house and go, "Hey, look, you can
No,
see
it's just a plant.
look at my social medias. I love this rotting corpse, smell. It's just the plant, you know."
Oh God, I remember one of my friends in the nursery industry. He had one that flower, and it was a very mature specimen. And you could smell it from the car park. It was
Mm.
quite foul. And I'm just like, have you got any bulbs that I could I could buy from you? And he's going, yes, yes, here.
Are
And
they
they're not
expensive to buy?
nah, they're not because they're not really a marketable product. It's hard to market something that smells like death.
I can
But
imagine.
in saying that though, from growing a
Uh,
few of them, I always like to get people to stick their nose in it, and this is partially for humour because everybody goes that's either horse manure or like it's not pleasant. But I don't think I've got a sense of smell anymore because I don't think anything of it. But I could
yeah.
send a bulb over to you. I could post one out, and then in a couple of years, you can tell me what you think of it.
I'll think about it, and I'll get back to you in about a decade, I think.
As I say, they're not really a marketable plant, but
No,
I'll
they're
just give
not.
them away to people that like them.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to plant. I mean, the problem is they only flower every 7 years, right? Or
Yeah,
so.
pretty much. It's sort of a bulb which it goes in leaf dormancy leaf and then eventually it flowers, but it's not really one for your more normal home gardener. That one's more for your enthusiasts, I think.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Daniel Fuller, who I know you're connected with as well on LinkedIn.
Mm,
And we were talking about indoor plants very briefly, and how it's funny how plants with variegated leaves, like a Monstera Thai constellation or something like that, go for crazy money or
oh
can
my
go for a lot of
gosh.
money,
Yeah.
despite
Yep.
the fact that it's actually a negative genetic mutation. It's like you're literally
Yes.
buying
Yep.
somebody who has, it's not quite the right as saying they've got a type of cancer or something like that, but it's
No,
literally
no, no,
like
no, no.
it's a birth defect.
Yeah.
It's something wrong with the plant, technically speaking, and we're going to spend more money on it, you know?
Yeah. No, I found that a lot. Variegation we don't normally charge for variegated varieties. Some places do, but with variegation, you're completely spot on. For example, when I worked at a hedging nursery, if you have a pittosporum here and a pittosporum there, half the time the variegation, not half, all of the time, the variegation one doesn't grow as well as the non-variegation one.
Yeah.
But that variegated monstera fad, I don't know whether that's still going, but my God, people were paying like $150 for a 14 centimeter pot, and
Yeah.
I'm just going. And it's partially, I think it's a lot to do with TikTok trends, but yeah, that was wild. It wasn't that long ago that the Dutchies used to sell you a tulip, and people would sell you a tulip that's worth more than a house. Like imagine Australia. Here's a tulip. Here's a house. That happened. That happened to the Dutchies a long time ago, and it's crazy to think. But yeah, trends can be wild.
That's the thing, right? Like, and it's not like these are investments,
Mm,
like
mm.
because the
They're
trend is.
perishable products.
I guess you could time the market right in a certain sense, and at the start of the trend, buy something, and at the peak of the trend, sell it as an investment. But for
Mm.
most people, if you're going to put a plant in the ground, you want it there for a while, and by the time it's mature, People have moved on if you buy them for a
Yeah,
trend. So,
it's a
I mean,
personal investment,
well, yeah, or they're just chasing internet clout and they don't even
pretty
like the
much.
plant.
Mm.
Well, I was going to say, what sort of plants are timeless then in your mind, right? Are there certain plants that are just go tos all the time? You go back 10, 20, 30, 50 years, they're still staples. They're great to have. What would you say on
Mm.
that?
Oh, 100%. Well, I'm not going to say corpse flowers. But look, sort of like I think a lot of people like English box, but that's sort of a classic Australian, sort of Melbourne, really staple plant. But in my experience, say something like a Euronymous green rocket is actually a superior plant. It stays green when English box loses its colour. Um, Also, and you look at some plants that might have sold well, but that personally I don't really like. But yeah, it just depends on what you prefer. But there's a few staples out there that I really like. Mixing in with some agaves, Kichiokans, mixing in with some. I think a lot of aloes are really popular. I think people like aloes. People love olives. Um, and a lot of people really like just having one special tree in the middle. A lot of the gardens we do, for example, people will get, say, a Queensland bottle tree and then we'll use
Mm,
spotlights on that Queensland bottle tree. And as it grows up, it does form that trunk, but quite often we put them in when they're advanced. Um, and I think a lot of timeless plants are really timeless because they last a long time and they make a really nice feature and they up the value of your home. People completely, I think, overlook the fact that having a great garden increases the value of your home. It's the same thing
yeah.
as a lawn. If you put a property up for sale and the lawn is dead, you're not going to get the best price for it.
Yep.
It's an investment, but it's a well worthy investment, especially in gardens, lawn care, where you put that money in. You might not feel as if you're going to get it back, but in some way you're going to get it back from enjoyment or house value. So at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Do you? Do you? I'm just looking at this Euronymous green rocket here that you were talking about before. I'll put that on the screen really quickly. Took a while for me to find.
Mm.
That's probably a competitive nursery that I've just put on there, so that's bad form, Luke, isn't it?
No, I don't work at a hedging nursery anymore. That's fine.
So you've been saying because I say pittosporum. I'm getting this
Oh
wrong,
God, no,
aren't
that's wrong. It's a pittosporum.
I? Okay, so how many how many years in horticultural jail do I get for that?
Not very. It's quite common. I mispronounce names quite often. You know, it's like okay, when you talk about aloes, like I used to say alloys, but then people go, no, it's aloe like aloe vera, and
Okay,
then that made me go,
alloy like
"Hmm,
a
like a
like an
car.
alloy wheel.
Yeah,
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 like a combination of different metals.
yeah.
That's an alloy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another possibly an underrated plant is we've got one called Echeveria Fire and Ice, and it's very striking. If you can find a photo of that, it's a real pretty plant. It doesn't take too well to frost, but it's very visually attractive. Um, yeah, there's a few others. Especially, we specialize in a plant called a Amac variegata Euphorbia Amac variegata, and it's a native
Yep.
from Yemen. And my God, is it one pretty plant? It's got a variegated trunk to it, and it grows up like candelabra. And it's an extremely It's rare. It's extremely attractive, and it loves coastal soil. A lot of our plants really love that coastal soil. Um, and yeah, it's one of my plants which is on my bucket list personally. I'm like, I have to buy this from Colin. It is such a stunning specimen. So if you get the time, to any listeners, Google Euphorbia amac variegata, and it looks incredible. It's a stunning plant.
I you talk about coastal sands. I'm going to change the subject a little bit here because
Sure.
I found out that there is a bit of a theory that you know how Western Australia is very sandy, very very sandy.
Mm.
I have just recently found out there's a bit of a theory that there were several massive tsunamis back in the day that um, caused Western Australia's sand. So the West
Mm.
Australian coast got hit by some enormous tsunamis and deposited and left all the sand there. And I was like,
Mm.
that's interesting. I saw this guy on YouTube and he was talking about it. And they're looking at this stuff from the sky and there's all these ripples. And so you look on Google Maps and you're like, oh, wow, this is fascinating. And there's some areas where they go from old forest straight to sort of beachy. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, low lying plants,
Mhm.
salt tolerant plants, and then bam, forest, old growth forest.
Yeah.
And they were saying that if you have a look at the topography,
Mhm.
the ground actually goes up where it goes. The forest is low lying and it goes up and they go, that's a tsunami. That's
Yeah.
washed in all this sand. I was like, that's fascinating. I've never thought about that. And then that's also kind of terrifying because where do all the people live? Where that tsunami apparently 5,000 years ago just wiped everything out. And you're like,
I've
well, that's great, isn't it?
I've got a good contrast for that. People forget that the entire Western Port Bay, like that was land. So we're connected from, say, Queenscliff to Sorrento. That was originally a bridge. And when that bridge faulted, that entire span of water from the ocean just rushed into. I mean, it would be absolutely terrifying. But a lot of people that haven't really paid much attention to the fact that the entirety of Western Port Bay and the entirety, of the from Queenscliff all the way in around Melbourne, Geelong, Mornington Peninsula on this side, that was all connected. And if you sit at the bottom, somebody told me once, if you were alive thousands of years ago and somehow still alive today, if you sat there and looked at the Mornington Peninsula, we would be a mountain. It's hard to think about,
Yeah.
but it was that type of topography that's changed, and it's God. It would be terrifying to think when that wall actually broke and the sea came in. Just it's like, oh, gotta get out of here. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible. We've got an incredible country. The landscapes here are amazing. You could go to the beach in the same day that you go up to say Mount Donnebrang or Mount Buller the next day. It's very special down here.
Yeah. I mean, nature is wild, eh? I saw a map of a volcano up in, or it's a volcano that has been active for a very, very long time, up in northern New South Wales. And if you just are driving around, you're like, oh, this is a jagged, hilly area,
Mm,
beautiful forest and all that sort of stuff. And you look on the map and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a massive, it looks like a crater, but it used to be a volcano.
yeah.
And it's, that's what Mount Warning is, I believe, a remnant of a volcano. I might be getting that wrong, but it's around that area. And you think, like, wow, like, can you imagine being there? Like, this thing is kilometers wide. And you're like, can you imagine being there when that thing went off? When that, it's like, and, those things, they don't happen very often, but when they
No,
do happen,
and you wouldn't
it's,
want to be around
yeah.
when they do.
No,
Um,
that's what I mean. So I'm feeling like all the sandy soil. Every time I think of sand now, I'm going to think, oh, well, this apparently is from a tsunami, and
yeah,
and all of our houses are built on the area that was hit by the tsunamis. So,
it's
oh,
like
gee.
when people put a beach box up and you're going, oh, in 200 years it'll be underwater. But it's also worth noting as well when people buy plants, people go, I'll put in natives. Well, what do you mean? Do you mean Australian natives or native to the area? Because there is a difference there.
Yes. Yep. This is something I talk about a lot. Like I get annoyed by people who are very strong on the native front from a moral aspect, and they're like,
Mm,
"You must plant natives," and you're like, "Well, okay, I could get something from Darwin and plant it in
yeah,
Tasmania. Is that going to make you
yeah,
happy?"
yeah.
Like it's you could call it native, but they are nowhere near the same climate. And you could take something from Europe and it would suit Tasmania more. You could take something from Southeast Asia and it would suit Darwin perfectly. They're pretty much the same climate. So I don't know. What do yeah, that stuff annoys me.
Yeah, it's a big thing too. A lot of councils require a certain amount of natives, but we work within that as well. But yeah, you're right. It depends on the personal style, but I think not so much sort of putting natives in your backyard, but it's more so much taking care and conserving what we have. It's when we do these new big builds of houses upon houses upon houses, we're not thinking to ourselves. where's the trees? A, it's going to be hot because there's more concrete around. B, um, there's not going to be much room for wildlife. Town planning is very important, and also preserving green wedge areas and green wedge spaces. I would value probably that more than, say, doing a garden full of natives. Personally, I find my garden is a bit of a mixed mush of different things I've collected from over the years. And I think a garden should really represent you and represent your passions and interests.
Mm.
And obviously, we work within clients to guarantee that and work within their tastes, and we can source things that we might not grow ourselves from our, as I say, from our partners that we work well with. And it's one of those types of things. A garden should represent your personality, in my opinion. Um, and yeah, if that is completely 100% native, then that's 100% native. But yeah, I'm not snobby at all. I don't judge. The only time I judge people's gardening is when something is quite clearly improperly placed, and I'm going,
Yeah. And the, I've said it so many times. So people who listen to the podcast all the time are going to feel like I'm being a dead horse here. But in WA, a thing that I hate, I've just moved into a house with the thing that I hate the most. Okay,
oh dear.
which is when people have a lawn. I love lawn, and then they plant right next to the lawn something that's super water wise, like a
Yeah.
succulent or something like that,
Mhm.
and then they water them with the same station. And you're like, what are you doing? You're not
Yeah.
actually saving any water. Anyway, I've moved into a house which has exactly this. And I'm like, ugh. Anyways, there's all these sorts of water-wise plants that they've put in there to be water-wise. And they're doing all right. And then the lawn is, yeah, anyway. So there's a lot of stuff. It's well-meaning people. I'm not trying to rain on their efforts here and be too harsh for it, but it's super common here in WA.
Mm.
It's like if you want to save water, if you really want to save water, then extend the garden bed out, and
Yeah.
put in more things that like that, and then reduce your watering time from the lawn. But anyways,
Oh, for sure.
I'm
If you did
waffling
a
too much
garden
now.
full of Yeah, if you did a garden full of cactus, I mean, you plant them, you water them when they're established, and then you just let nature do it for a lot of the time. The lawns are a bit different, though. Like, personally, I don't know. I'd be interested to see if you think this is too much, but I like to water mine pretty much once a week. I give weed and feed, and then I stop. I mow every 2 weeks because at the moment I'm trying to connect it up. Through winter, my lawn just got obliterated by Indian miners. I tried to feed some some native birds, and then the Indian miners came, and I'm going, right, nobody's getting any more bird feed, but they've still decimated my lawn. So I'm sort of connecting up the dots there, but I'll send you a photo of it in good time, I'm sure. But yeah, it's I like to do it every fortnight personally. But what's your opinion on sort of how often you would hand water, um, or I suppose you would put in irrigation for a lot of your bigger lawns. But how often would you say you would water in a large scale lawn? Would that be more of a hand watering thing, or would that be, as I say, once a week? When I was very young, somebody said treat a lawn like it's one big plant, and that advice hasn't let me down yet.
No, well, I've got to be honest. When you said Indian miner, I thought, is that like a Asian FIFO worker or something?
No,
Because I'm not.
no,
I googled it. It's a
Indian
bird.
common miners, Indian miners. They're no, it's not a some bloke working in Western Australia. No,
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like
just for our
has
audio
somebody
listeners.
come back from their FIFO shift and they're just angry at you. They're doing some damage on your lawn. Have
They're
you
going, what? What
have
are they
you
talking
upset
about?
some of your neighbours? They just
Yeah.
happen to be Indian. Don't.
No, 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 no.
No, okay, it's a bird. All right, I get it. I don't know. Maybe we don't get them over here in WA.
Oh, really?
Which
They
I
are
don't know,
so
but
invasive.
they're probably everywhere. I'm just not I don't know. I'm not a bird expert, but as you can clearly
Mm-mm.
tell, the watering. So obviously it's different everywhere. I think once a week with Melbourne weather is probably fine because you're probably getting enough rain here. Here in
Mm.
Perth, we're restricted in our watering to 2 times a week at 10 millimeters per watering. and it forces you to be really smart with what you do with everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again, is that I think the best quality lawn contractors in the country, the most knowledgeable on average, because there's some brilliant ones everywhere, don't get me wrong, but on average, the WA lawn community is either amazing or they just settle
Really
for
bad.
mowing dust bowls, because that's all you get here. It's like either it's the best lawn you've ever seen in your life or it's basically dead, because we had 2.5 mil in 7 months last summer, and 1.5 mil in 4 months the summer before. So you have to rely on the water. You have limited water, and because of that, you have to be really smart with wetting agents and biostimulants for root growth. If you're in an area that has good soil and you have a fairly consistent amount of rainfall, I think I want to water as little as possible and to get away with it, not because you're trying to save water, but because something like kikuyu, the more you water it, the more it's going to grow. And what happens is the roots, you don't force it to go deep. And so when you, like you have with any plant, when it's getting a little bit dry, it's going to put its energy into growing deeper roots. And that means it's going to get to the part of the soil that's moist for longer, because the top bits are going to dry out. And you end up getting a resilient plant that when the really hot weather comes and you have some dry spells, yes, you will need to increase your watering, but it doesn't cook in a day or two because it's built those deep roots. It's more resilient. And so it's not the water wise stuff is almost like a side benefit to it. It's the resilience you get from the plant. And another thing that people don't realize is, people in WA do, but wetting agents, especially those that have really good retentive capacities, so not just something that's a penetrant that gets it down, but has a retainer as well. There's studies in WA sand, so I'm not sure how these numbers quite transfer across into a good quality soil, but there's studies that after 5 weeks, there is 20% more water in that soil compared to an untreated area at 5 centimeters of depth. After 5 weeks. And so essentially, you're getting 20, maybe 30% in that first month more water actually staying where it is needed for the same amount of water being applied. And that's really so for me, like, I would prefer to water less and apply a wetting agent. And you might not need it in an area where there's a lot of rainfall, but I would prefer to water less to encourage the deep roots, and then use a wetting agent to make the most of the water I'm putting on there anyway, and then build a resilient plant rather than just watering as much as needed to keep it really lush and green.
It's the same theory as, say, when a plant gets hydrophobic, is when it's been underwatered too much, it won't retain any water and it will sink through, bubbles will come up, and it's not the best way to do it. You're better off to just consistently keep the soil moist. I hate to use that word. Than as opposed to drying it out completely. Because you're right. It's same thing with the lawn. If you let the lawn dry out completely, the plant's going to go backwards in 5 seconds of a. And I would much prefer to keep not so much cacti and succulents, but you'll be surprised. Even succulents can get quite hydrophobic if you don't maintain a regular watering schedule. That's probably my biggest thing when I was a kid. Doing weekend watering at Haas, it really taught me how to water properly. A lot of people just go, well, and then nothing, you have to go per plant and give 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. And on sometimes bigger pots, 20 seconds. But I would much rather a proper managed schedule of watering as opposed to just watering it when it's already dead and then hope for the best.
Oh, mate, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, like with lawns as well, like people. This is one of the things about lawns, is that it is a lot of work to get it to that beautiful level, and people love it. People really get into it. And then other people go, oh, it can't be that hard. I'm just going to put some stuff down and hope for the best. And that's when you get that massive spike in growth. And then it's just horrible to maintain. Like you chuck, I've heard wetting agent is good. I've heard fertilizer is good. And they just go, well, here's a bag. I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to chuck it all out. And you've doubled your application rate. Yeah.
Too much nitrogen.
How good. Yeah, I've never, too much nitrogen, never heard of her.
Yeah.
Somebody I've never met before. So anyway, and then they go, "Oh, I hate this lawn care thing." It's, oh well, there's a bit of research you could have done that could have saved you maybe a smidgen of that pain that you just put yourself through.
Oh, for sure. It's the same thing as when people, I say blood and bone, for example, is great for bringing back green growth on a plant when it's yellow, but it's not a long term fertilizer because it is like literally straight crushed blood and bone. Um, so I always say, look, if the plant's gone backwards, give it a little bit, but don't get it on the stem of the plant because it'll burn it. In the same way that you wouldn't just get a bag of blood and bone and go wee on the grass because then all of a sudden that entire patch will be dead.
Yeah,
So yeah, like it's the same thing with growing plants, like a little bit of background knowledge, little bit of time, um, and going to the right people, going to the professionals, going to a place that you trust. And you can quite often tell by the demeanor when you walk in that they know generally what they're doing, as
yeah,
opposed to, "Oh, I just work here. I'm just running a till." Um,
yes,
it's the same thing when you talk to a lawn experts. The first question I would sort of trick is, "What's the difference between two or three different grasses?" Because I don't know, and you could do a bit of research yourself and see if they're telling the truth. But half the time, if you take your time, do a little bit of research, and get the right people to do it, you'll find that the results will be of what you expect. But yeah, yeah, it is something like that.
I was going to ask you. We're coming up. We're at an hour and 17 minutes. This is what I love
Oh,
about the
really?
podcast. Yeah, how fast things go. You're having a
I'm
good chat.
I'm there's one thing that I liked about doing TikTok videos. It made me more comfortable in front of a camera because when you speak, and I'm sure you found this yourself, when you speak into a phone, it's different when it's family and friends and you're saying grab lunch, grab dinner. But it's actually quite good. Have you found doing podcasts quite good for your self confidence? Because I've found doing little TikTok videos quite good for that.
If I'm being honest, I was a little bit too confident when I was young, and I got what was good for my self confidence was being overly confident and then making some stupid mistakes.
Yeah, you had to pull
Um,
back a little bit.
yeah, no, but no, you're 100% right. It was actually that I had done, like I said, I was making videos on like they were 5 minute videos and a few other short forms content for these groups, which is really for lawn mowing contractors mostly.
Mm.
I remember there was one that was like, it was about 10 or 11 minutes. I was explaining to people how much they should charge, or not exactly. I was like, this is how you work out what to charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recorded that. I started recording it maybe 5 times because I was like really critical of the way that I was explaining it. And I was like, you're too long winded, or you haven't explained it right. And you really, yeah, you are self critical. And then it gets to a point where you're like, you
Yeah,
know
for
what?
sure.
Like, you're probably the only one who's judging this, or there might be a couple of people who do, but 99% don't care.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask you, and we can end on this because this will be really interesting,
Yeah,
is
sure.
if you were king of the nursery universe for a day, or you had a
Mhm.
magic genie and you could change something about the industry, what change would you make to the nursery industry? Like, what if you could just magically make something happen? What
Mm.
would you do?
Well, to be honest, it's I wish that we could iron out some of the grooves and we all got along really well. It's a very high competitive industry. It's the same as lawn mowing. I just wish that even nurseries that do really well and nurseries that don't do too well, we all got to help each other out and lift ourselves up. Otherwise, the big guys, and specifically, the big suppliers and the people with a lot of money, they will leap ahead while the small guys get left behind. My biggest wish is that, yeah, we all just sort of got along. It sounds simple, and it's probably a big dream, but I just really wish a lot of businesses focus more on helping each other out than bringing each other down.
Yeah,
Um, and especially in the nursery industry, it's high turnover, it's high cost, fertilizer, soil, pots, staff. Um, and everybody's trying their best, and I just think if there was one thing I could change is that everybody tried their best to each other and be nice to each other, and try to make it work as opposed to trying to not do it, and yeah, just copying everybody. Really, I hate that. I think people should work collaboratively as opposed to, if somebody started the lawn business and, oh my god, you're going, they've got the same logo as me, they've got the same this, and they're doing the same thing. It's yeah, that would be the biggest thing that I would change, is that we we all got along and we're all in it together, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, like I said before, every industry, you need a level of competitiveness, right?
Mm.
But you also, like, there's a level of just being
Healthy
a,
competition's good.
yeah, healthy competition, being a jerk, being a wanker, being,
No,
yeah, it, it, it all that does, being a cowboy, cutting prices, being too cheap, not helping people out, is it actually ruins the reputation of the industry as a whole.
as a whole, yeah, absolutely.
And that hurts everybody. Whereas great businesses that work really well raise the reputation of the industry, which helps everybody out as a whole. And it's
Mm.
like, I would love to help any business that's doing great work in the industry and actually cares about their clients and takes ownership when they make mistakes. And,
Yeah, for sure. If
so
somebody
yeah.
came to you and said, "Look, Luke, you know, I've worked nurseries all my life, but now I want to become a full time lawnmower," and if somebody was genuine and they're like, "Look, I don't want to go into competition with you, but can you help me out in terms of where to go and what my starting point is?" You would be head over heels and going, "Yeah, mate, this is welcome to the industry." If somebody just started up and just, as you say, you just start into it, do it cheap, and then people will get onto that pretty quick.
Well, we're blessed. We're 11 years old now in business, and
Mm,
we're at a stage where we only do a select type of work. So
mm,
we only do packages, and we might do a few little renovations every now and then.
mhm.
But we're only doing one day a fortnight of renovations. Some guys are doing it, all week long. But
Yeah.
that's all we're doing: lawn renovations and lawn and garden packages. And so that what that means is that like I had it today, like somebody saw the truck and they came up to me and they're like, "Oh, I've got some problems in my lawn and this and that." And I had a quick
Mhm.
chat with them. I said, "Look, we're not, after talking to them, they love mowing their lawn. So we're not the business
Yeah.
for them because we take it all on." And then you're like, "Hey, look, I can recommend you a few people or we can have a bit of a
Yeah.
chat and blah, blah." And
People
so
pick up on that.
we recommend, I reckon Carrie's probably passing on maybe 5 or 6 jobs a week at this time of the year. Like a
Yeah.
job every single day to somebody else, just to go. Someone's like, "Hey, we want a lawn installation," or we used to do that. We don't do that anymore. We don't have the time, but this guy's good. We've got an overgrown
Mm.
lawn. We've clean up for a rental. Hey, we'll pass it on to here, and that's what I mean. And those people then go, "Wow, they're really appreciative of it." When they're first starting out, they get a leg up on the industry, and yeah, you know what I mean. Like that's I feel much more. I guess the way I could put it is the most proud things that I am, the things I'm most proud of in the industry is actually the people that I've helped get a leg up in the industry because I love the industry,
Mm.
and
Yeah. For sure.
especially from the podcast, the stories of people who they tell me from the podcast being like, I was undercharging, and this podcast helped me charge better or helped me learn something and up my game, and that's
Mm.
awesome. That's the best stuff you can get.
Yeah, and it's the same thing as it's same thing in the plant nursery industry. When you're doing a bit of retail, you go and look. Our shop might be quite specific, but here's an indoor plant specialist 20 minutes down the road, and he's great. Or he's a screening specialist. And then you sort of, this is what I mean. A lot of the smaller places, they will work together and have their own niche. When some of the biggest places, you're just overwhelmed with so many varieties. It's hard to you'll never specialize in one thing. Um, so yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's interesting the parallels between garden care package, lawn mowing, and lawn installation in the nursery industry. There is quite a lot of overlap here.
Yeah, well, we're all dealing with plants, but I think there's fundamentals of a good business as well.
Yeah, yeah. Oh god, yeah, absolutely. Mm.
So, mate, well, look, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, so you can find me at Zani Imaging on Instagram. That is my personal account, but occasionally I put reels like shops opening tomorrow, or I might do a bit of work related stuff in there. But a lot of it's sort of my photography and my personal hobby. Um, you can find Colin Height Design on Instagram as well as Facebook. We are working towards a new website where customers will be able to do sort of a typical like a click and collect. They can come up to the store, pick one something the next day, but that's very much in the works at the moment. So yeah, Instagram and Facebook for CHD, which is Colin Height Design for short. To shorten it out a little bit. And yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok is Zanny's Gardening. Um, it's more of a bit of a blog. I don't really do consistent posts. It's just a bit of fun. And if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. It's my spare time, and if I think of something, then I go and right. It might only do once a video every few months, but yeah, it's just a bit of free time and a bit of fun.
Well, mate, if every now and then you get 400,000 views, it's pretty good for a bit of fun, isn't it?
Oh, I was shocked. I'm like, Jesus, I'm not the only person that thought of it. It made me feel like, oh my God, I'm not when you drive past a place and the fence is being ripped up and you're going, who did that and why did they do it and why is that there? And I want to know the story behind it. And apparently I wasn't the only one. But yeah, anyway, that was very humbling. So you can find me on all the socials. Personal stuff will be Steven or Zani, which is my last name. And do check out our big landscapes for the company because you'll be pretty amazed at the scale we can do. We love mass planting, we love big jobs. And we've got a pretty unique style and it's low maintenance and it's very in at the moment because a lot of people hate high maintenance gardens. It's great to come back to a job because then you go and I can keep on top of it and that gets more business, but it's not good for the person that owns the garden who wants to not do that as much. So we try and take care of people as opposed to just selling something that we think we can pass on quite cheaply.
Well, mate, I've loved having you on. Thanks for talking me through the nursery industry and your own little experiences. And
You're always welcome.
everybody else, we will see you in the next podcast.
Thank you very much.